first went to New York, I stayed with Lou Marini, who I'd met at the National Stage Band Camp in Portland, Oregon. My very first day in New York, I had a gig, and as it turned out, someone had called Lou and asked them if they knew a bass player. They had a gig that night, and so I had a gig with Victor Lewis on drums and Lou Soloff, Larry Willis, and myself on bass. I stayed in New York for a while, played some various gigs with people, and then I went back to Portland, Oregon. Several months later I came back, and at that time I met Ted Curson again, who I had previously met in Copenhagen years prior, and he was forming a new band and asked me to become a part of it, which I did. There was Nick Brignola on baritone sax, Jim McNeely on piano, Chris Woods on alto sax, Sam Jacobs on percussion, and myself on bass, and Ted Curson, of course, great trumpet player, Charles Mingus alumni, was the leader. It was a great band. We played a lot of gigs. I remember our very first gig was to be at the 5 Spot in New York, but the day we were supposed to play it closed, so Ted went to another club that hadn't had music. This was a club called the Tin Palace on the Bowery, and so we played that gig. We actually played there several times, and had a very successful run. A lot of people came and seemed to enjoy the music very much. We made an album called Jubilant Power, and this was set up by a person by the name of Irv Kratka from N.Y.C Records. And we played a concert in Philadelphia maybe a week prior to this album, to kind of go over the material that we were going to play. And after the rehearsal, the guys went to have something to eat, asked if I wanted to go. I said no, I want to stay and just practice. So I took my bass in the corner of the stage and started playing my music. And I didn't know that the producer of the record to be, Irv Kratka, owner of N.Y.C Records, was sitting in the back of the hall. He heard my music and came up to the stage after I finished, was excited and said, "What was that?" And I said, "Well, that's some of my solo music I played." And he says, "Do you have music for a group?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, I want you to make an album with me." So I gave him my phone number where I was staying. At that time, I was staying with John Stowell, great jazz guitarist, at his apartment in Dobbs Ferry, just on the Sawmill Parkway, about 30 miles north of New York. So Irv had to call me about 3 or 4 times before I took him seriously, because, you know, talk is cheap. People say a lot, but they never do come through with what they say. But in this case, he did. And I used on this initial recording, it's called Star Dance. It received 5 stars in downbeat. Kind of an unusual setting. I had Paul McCandless on oboe English horns, John Stowell on guitar, Steve Gadd on the drums, and myself on bass. And it was great. It turned out really, really nice. I remember being in New York recording Star Dance. I think it was about 1977, something like that. And I won't mention the studio's name, but it was the album I was doing with Steve Gadd was on it, and John Stowell, Paul McCandless, Ralph Towner. Was Ralph on it? I'm not sure. But anyways, I was in a separate booth with my acoustic bass, and I was taking a solo. And right in the middle of my solo, this big rat comes out between my legs, and I'm watching this and soloing at the same time. I thought, well, nah, you get another studio next time. That's New York. Another story about New York. I was playing with a drummer whose name was Stan Gage, and he was playing with Mose Allison at the time, great blues singer. And Stan asked me if I wanted to come and play with Mose. He was looking for a bassist, and I said sure. So we did a rehearsal. The music felt great. Mose liked me. I liked him. And our first gig was at the Bottom Line in New York. And I remember being in the dressing room and telling Mose I was getting ready to make an album of my own with Inner-City Records. And Mose is the one who told me, he says, David, make sure you get your own mechanical licenses. You get your own publishing company so you can collect your own mechanical licenses. Mose said it took me almost 30 years to find out about that. So very fortunately for myself, I learned from Mose Allison the importance of getting a mechanical license. So I could retain that money on my behalf instead of giving it back to the record companies, which were collecting most of the money anyways. But it was a great gig at the Bottom Line. Funny gig. When Mose would take a solo, it almost became like free music, like just avant-garde music, and I thought that was great, and I just jumped at it and just, you know, took advantage of that and went along with what was happening. It turned out great. I had a great time playing with Mose. We played several places back in the East Coast together, and with Stan Gage, him and myself. It was wonderful.